The best place to hide the truth is in the pages of a book.
Maybe we should just read. Maybe we should just read.
Welcome to Hayes Reviews. Yes, hello, good evening. This is Nick, creator of Hayes Reviews, and welcome to another live stream, live reading on the channel. We're back, we've had a week off, and we're going to be continuing tonight. Hopefully, if we don't get interference from the man himself, we're going to be continuing with Zbigniew Brzezinski's book, Between Two Ages. It's a 1970 publication. Boy, did he have a lot of foresight when he wrote this book. What a genius mind. He could just see where it was all going, not because there was a plan, not because he knew what the plan was. No, he was just super intelligent. That's why he was a presidential advisor. That's why he set up his own think tank. And that is why he wrote many books, and he was a guest on many mainstream news television programs over in America for his astute analysis. And so we're going to be reading his book tonight. It's been a great series so far. This is part 8. The last 2 videos we did had some technical difficulties. It was a little bit glitchy. Things were going wrong. The sound got out of whack. Then the video fell behind as well. And it was no good. So a very kind viewer got in touch and helped me do some troubleshooting. And I think we have a good chance of getting through tonight's broadcast without any seriously frustrating things happening to the stream. So thank you all for tuning in live. We've got Frank, Tammy, LJ, and Taro Galaxy over on YouTube and Odyssey and Rumble. Crickets, but that's all good. I don't mind. It gives me less chats and comments to focus on and read. I'm not very good at multitasking. So yes, we're back tonight. Hopefully the sound is good. Hopefully the audio is good. We're going to be continuing with the book. We're going to reread a little bit of what we did on the last video because it's been 2 weeks and this book's dense. It's hard to remember everything he talks about. It's big ideas. It's academic in nature. This book got Z-Big noticed by David Rockefeller himself, and together they established the Trilateral Commission after this book was published. So it's quite a well-known book. It's not widely available. It's one of those that's artificially priced high. So you got to shell out a little bit of cashish to get your hands on a copy. You can find cheaper copies available every now and again, but it's not one of those that they're printing and updating and making sure everyone can get their hands on it, right? So that's the question. Why? Why is that? Who's the intended audience for this book? What is the purpose behind its writing, and what is it meant to convey to whom? And I tend to think this sort of book, it's packed full of warnings, and if we don't change course now, then such and such a thing is going to happen in the future. These warnings are not really warnings. They're more like revelations of the plan. This is what's going to happen soon. And I also think this kind of book, because it's omitting some important aspects of reality, it also serves as a limited hangout. And so might be the kind of book that you give to your politicians, your puppeticians, and they can repeat it and regurgitate the ideas and the concepts and the causalities explained in this book. And that can provide a narrative to the sheeple, the unthinking masses, and they'll go, yeah, that sounds smart, that's plausible, that's intelligent, I'll buy that, I'll believe that, never suspecting that there is a piece of the story being omitted or hidden or occulted, if you want to use that term. So I feel like that's what this book is doing. He's running cover for, the super parasites, the really powerful, influential, psychotic, psychopathic people running the show, and that's my own little thesis. And you can put yours in the chat if you think otherwise. Just so we've got Adam here and we've got Renata as well. Good evening to you both. Lovely to have you here. And Frank says sound and audio is all good at this end. Wonderful. Thank you for that feedback. Everything's looking good at my side. I've got my little stats window open, which I never used to use, and it's looking good. My CPU usage is only at 15%, which is not very much, and we haven't dropped too many frames yet. So providing my laptop doesn't overheat, and it shouldn't do because I blew all the dust out of the fans. That was part of one of the things that I did to remedy the problem. I think we should be good. And we can rule out interference from Zbig's Ghost or, MI5 or any of the alphabet soup agencies that collect the data and listen on this sort of thing. Let's face it, these days, I don't think they would have a human running interference anyway. They'd probably just have some AI program messing with things. Who knows? Who knows? At this point, I don't even know if you're hearing the words I'm saying and seeing the video that I'm broadcasting, because they've got technology that could edit it and alter it in real time. That's what these filters are on your phone, right? You put these filters on, you have a good laugh because it turns your face into a cat and it turns your voice into a Smurf. And you think, oh, it's great. It's so funny. Ha ha ha. We all laugh at it and have a good giggle. What that's showing you is that they have the power to edit video and audio in real time. And they roll it out in these kind of comical, silly little, what do you call them? Apps. And we think it's hilarious, and we pay a bit of money, and we download it, and we all laugh, and we have a good giggle about it, not realizing that they probably have very advanced versions of this, which you might be able to apply to your camera and microphone feed so that you show up in a Zoom call, for example, as a totally different person. And the people on that call can't tell that you're actually overlaid with some sort of AI-generated visual auditory layer that distorts who you really are and what you really sound like. I'm sure that is possible. We've seen it in films, and the idea that it doesn't exist and it's not being rolled out, not being used, is kind of silly to me. So my thinking is that they could just whack one of these filters onto any live stream they choose, and the feed that you're receiving at your end could be me saying totally wacky things that I would never say in real life, like vote Labor or pay your taxes, these kind of things. I don't know. I can't be where you are receiving the broadcast and sitting here sending out the broadcast, so I don't know. I hope that's not happening, and I hope you're hearing everything that I'm saying as accurately and truthfully as possible. But that is a little bit of a tangent and a side note. Celine Lyon, how's it going? Good to have you here. Good evening. Digital ID for your safety and security. Yes, I was looking at the Stop Digital ID petition that is on the gov.uk website here. As I was watching it, it reached 2,888,888 signatories. And I took a screen grab, and then it flicked up to the next, and then I lost the screen grab. I forgot to save it, but I thought it was pretty cool. I saw all those 8s in a row. But of course, the government have published their response underneath that petition, and they've said, we are going to institute a digital ID during this administration. That was their response. It wasn't like, thank you for your concern. It wasn't sort of, we appreciate that people are worried. There was nothing written that would sort of comfort or reassure the nearly 3 million people who took the effort to sign that. There was just, we are doing this. Quite a bold, brazen, brash move on their part. But in this day and age, I was hearing somebody say this. I don't know. I can't remember which talking head I was listening to or where, but they were just saying it's so obvious. Oh, I remember it was a Real History with Melissa and Neil Foster, and they were just saying it's so obvious now. It's so blatant that these politicians, these talking heads, scientists, experts, these goons that get wheeled out to tell us what's going on, they don't even try to hide the fact that it's tyranny, that it is slavery, that it is unprecedented control over our lives, and we're just sleepwalking into it for the most part, you know. But it's not hidden, it's not secretive anymore. It's an open conspiracy, as H.G. Wells told us. So yes, digital ID, can't wait for that. A friend of mine, a colleague, was telling me that it's pretty much already here anyway. He recently remortgaged his house, and to do that process, he had to use some government thing called One Login or something like that, or OneGov. I don't know exactly. I haven't had the displeasure of having to use it, but he said there was literally no other way around it. And part of it was you get your passport. You scan your passport with your phone. You then put your phone next to the chip in your passport, and your phone reads the chip in your passport. And then you take a video selfie, but it's not just a picture of yourself like in a normal selfie. You have to do all the showing your face from different angles and up and down to make sure it can get a full deep scan of all those craggly wrinkles that you have, and laughter lines, and deep pores in your nose and all that kind of stuff, right? They really want to get all that juicy biometric data, because that's what it's all going to be about now. So in many ways, and as I said on a few streams ago when I got heckled by Mayday over on Odyssey, who's never been back since, and I'm not surprised because she did say goodbye. So I'm not surprised. I'm saying she. I'm just saying she because May makes me think of a female, but it could be a he. So as I was saying, we're pretty much there already, right? You've got to use your phone number, you've got to use your email address, and you can't do anything without these two things. Now, for example, with Facebook, I was trying to make a Meta account to run some ads for a product and a business, and I got locked out. And now whenever I go there, it just tells me, make a video selfie to sign back in. That's all it says. I can't remember if I've shown this on the stream before. I probably did. I probably showed this on the night I was heckled. But if I go to Facebook now, this is the page that greets me. Confirm your identity with a video selfie. To make sure that you're a real person, we need you to record a video selfie. We'll ask you to move your head during the recording to help us capture your face at different angles. I don't really want my face captured, to be honest, even though I'd live stream for 3 hours every Friday night. I'm sure it's already out there. But look, that's all I got. That's all. There's no, and a button to continue. And that's it. There's no email address. There's no phone number. There's no do this another way. There's computer says no, unless you give us your biometric data, and expect more of this on more and more services. You're going to get locked out, and then it's going to be, well, we can't let you back in because you might not be you. You might be a fake person. You might be a robot. And so I think, this is where it's heading. This is where it's going. And so it's already kind of pretty much sort of here. Maybe that's me being cynical, though. Maybe there is still hope to get away from it. Renata says they will push as much as we allow them to. I do think that resistance plays a huge role. Look what happened with the, dare I say it, vax. Are we still live? Yes, we are. We resisted and it stopped the awakened account more than the sheep. I love it. I love the optimism. I tend to agree. I think resistance does play a huge part. And I think I have no problem with anything you just said there, Renata. I appreciate you stopping by to leave a message. I really do. Renata does tarot readings on her channel for the various, what do you call them? Zodiac signs. And I check in. I'm a Virgo. I check in from time to time and hear the Virgo readings. And the last two have been really helpful. Like they've been on point and accurate and applicable to me. So worth checking out Renata's channel at some point if you're into that sort of thing. Lee Blunt says, what's this purple crown with a hashtag number? I wondered the same thing when it showed up. it's kind of a ranking system. Celine Lyon says it's training for the social credit scheme linked to your digital ID. Yeah, it's kind of like a top first, second, and third fans, and I think it rates you according to your participation in the chat. I can't turn it off. I've looked for a way to turn it off, and I've been unsuccessful. So if there is a way to turn it off and somebody knows, I'll ask my IT guy, actually. Now that I've got a direct line to my IT guy, I'll get in touch with him and see if we can get rid of it, because I hate it as well. I don't like it. I don't want it there. I didn't switch it on. I wasn't given a choice. Like many things in this digital age, we aren't given a choice. We're just given this, now it's updated and this new feature's here and it looks different and the menu's changed. Just kind of like every so often they move the supermarket around just to keep you there longer, so you get trapped looking for that thing that you used to know where it was, but now they've moved it all, so you have to walk around and around, up and down every aisle, and inevitably you impulse buy a load of extra things. It's just a con that they do every now and again just to keep you in the supermarket for longer. It's that, they upgrade and update and change things little by little. It's a totalitarian technique, tiptoeing us along further and further into more less and less privacy, less and less control over our IT and our digital tools, and more surveillance and more data gathering of our private, intimate details. So yeah, it's all the same kind of thing. LJ says, "What a pile of shit." I agree, but instead of saying shit, she put a little cute poo emoji, because LJ is not the kind of person who swears, so I'll swear on her behalf. So there you go. Tammy says, have to go to our YT account. I can't remember the steps though. Or maybe that's your YT account. All right, that's my homework for this week. I'm going to try and turn off these annoying crown rating hashtag things that you can see next to your names. Okay. So I think we're good. The stream seems stable. We have skipped a few frames, but it's not very much at all. And so that, because when you skip 0.1% frames due to encoding lag, that's when all the crackly nonsense starts happening. And once it starts, you can't stop it, or at least I didn't know how to stop it. So I'm going to do something a little bit different for tonight's intro. And I'm calling it an intro because it's not really going to be a preamble ramble, because it doesn't really have anything to do with the book we're reading or tonight's reading in general. It's something a little more personal, something that I just want to do. And so I will beg your patience and your kind attention, and just bear with me for maybe 20 minutes or so. It shouldn't take long. But basically, I didn't stream last Friday. The reason was that we had a funeral in the family, and it was exactly a week ago, 2 o'clock, sort of lunchtime, early afternoon, last Friday. And it was my granny, my beloved granny, 91 years old, and she died. And we had a funeral for her, and we gave her the best, most amazing send-off we could have possibly given her. And I kept thinking on the day that if she'd have designed this funeral herself, she would have done exactly what we did. It was so fitting and so appropriate and so beautiful, and it had all her favorite aspects, that things that she loved, the things that made up her identity, the things that she just embodied throughout her entire 91 years. 91 years. It's amazing. And so I wanted to do a little sort of tribute of my own at the start of this, just in memory of my granny. Part of the service that we had in the church that she had gone to since she was probably since she was a teenager. She went to the same church, most Sundays. There was a few Sundays where she was a bit too hungover and couldn't quite make it, but she made it up to the church, and she went there, and this is the church that I went to. It has a school next door to it, and I went to that school as a kid, and my mum went to that school, and so this church, this building, has been in our family, literally for generations. And I'm not much of a church goer, but I did used to take my granny to church if I was back home for the weekend, and I'd go with my mum, and I probably will continue some weekends to go with my mum. But I got confirmed. You know, it was a Catholic church. I was confirmed there. I was christened there. So yeah, it was an amazing day, and we held the service there. And part of the service was that the grandchildren. She had 5 grandchildren, plus partners as well. We all did readings and sort of contributed to the service. And my older cousin, my big cousin, she wrote the eulogy, and she asked us all to contribute some ideas and some memories and some things that we wanted to add. And this, what I'm going to read now, is just my contribution to the eulogy. So it's just a few memories. It's not a long thing, really. So I'm just going to read that. But she did a fantastic job with this eulogy. She kind of pulled it all together from us all, and just absolutely nailed it, knocked it out of the park. It was beautiful. There was laughter, there was tears. You know, it was a roller coaster, and it just really did Granny proud. But the bit I'm going to read right now is just the bit that I wrote and sent to her, which she kind of included some of it and folded it in, and it was my contribution. So before I do that, though, I'm just going to go over to the book camp. I'm just going to show you this. So this is the one of the best documents I think I have, you know, one of the latest additions to the Hayes Library, but it is the celebration of life for the order of service for my granny. And there she is, looking fantastic. I don't know how old she was in this picture, but she looks very similar to how she did look on her wedding day when she married my granddad. And so, yeah, I'm just going to read this thing through, and you can sort of have a look at my wonderful, beautiful granny. And I just appreciate it that I can share this with you and just have this moment to kind of honor her memory. And so here it is. I was thinking of Granny, and what came to mind was how we, as her grandchildren, probably got the best of her. Her humor, patience, generosity, time, affection, kindness, and love. And how she always put on a brave face and did her best to be upbeat and positive, no matter how she was feeling, especially since her partner, Roger, died. I went on a lot of shopping trips with Granny and Roger when I first came back to the UK from Vietnam in 2018, and I was licking my wounds. I don't know if I told this story, but I was living abroad, and I lost a lot of weight, and I was very thin, and I was having all sorts of like problems with mental health. So I came back to the UK in 2018 to try and fix myself. You know, nothing like going home, being around family. But anyway, that's a little side note. I came back from Vietnam, and I was licking my wounds. At the time, I felt like a bit of a loser. 32 years old, getting a lift with my granny and her boyfriend to go browse charity shops. But now I'm so glad I went on all those trips to Skipton and Hebden Bridge and beyond, wandering around, eating pork pies, drinking coffees, and scouring charity shops for good books. And I found a lot as well, as I always do. Another vivid memory I have is sitting at the dining table in Granny's kitchen when I was probably 7 or 8. She was preparing a bowl of ready brek. If you don't know, ready brek is a sort of powdered porridge that you add milk to, or water, you know, depending on what's available. She was stirring it up, mixing in the milk, and I recall watching the way the stirring motion made her whole upper body move, rotating on her hips, like she was putting so much into that one simple act. We all knew she wasn't much of a cook, but she really put a lot of effort and love into mixing that ready brek. Granny walked me to and from primary school many times, and I remember being excited going through the tunnel on Shakespeare Street that used to go underneath the railway. There was also a cake shop which we would go in on the way home, and I remember getting iced buns and enjoying these back at Granny's house, watching some after-school children's TV. Another good time was taking all the cushions off Granny's settee and chairs. My big cousin Kira and I would put our imaginations into full gear, rearranging those cushions to make all manner of situations and scenarios. That was a real treat. And I remember going to Granny's house, hoping we'd get to pull all those cushions off and jump around on them. In Burnley, there was a shop called Aladdin's Cave, and it was a bric-a-brac treasure trove of random items, household stuff, and toys. Granny would take Kira and me there on our regular trips to Burnley, and we would rummage through all the baskets and shelves to find some plastic toy or other to buy and take home with us. And Woolworths was another prime location for toy buying. Woolworths was slightly more upmarket than Aladdin's Cave. It was a real treat if we got to go there. I was always happy for a trip to Woolworths. I think what Granny really was, though, much more than the treats and trips down Burnley, was that she represented stability. She was always there at her house on Victoria Road for literally as long as I can remember. Granny always looked her best, always gave such care and attention to her beloved home. I remember playing on her path, swinging around a wooden sword that my dad made me. It was the best homemade wooden sword in my neighborhood. I was very proud of it. And I was practicing my slashing and slicing on the path to Granny's house. When I was at school the next day, one of the older boys was teasing me. And I hadn't realized he'd seen me acting out my wildest sword fighting fantasies, and I denied it flat out. No, that wasn't me. But the wonderful thing about Granny was that she always loved, accepted, and encouraged me, whatever phase or fad I happened to be going through. So whether it was sword swinging or baggy skater jeans or a prog rock band bassist or reclusive university student or a bedraggled and emaciated overseas English teacher, of all the phases I went through, Granny was always there in her house on Victoria Road, waiting with a smile to hear all my news, to slip me a few quid to get myself a treat. She never judged me, she never discouraged me, and she never had anything but enthusiasm for whatever childish thing I happened to be wrapped up in at the time. Granny was the lively, life-loving, beating heart of the family, and I know it feels like we've lost something. Granny attended all our events. She bought cards and presents to every special occasion. She always demanded a picture with her five grandchildren, and she never failed to be the lifeblood and soul sister of the party. She was a sort of nucleus around which we all gravitated. And now that she's not here, I know we all feel a bit unmoored, a bit adrift, unsure about what future family events are going to look like. But the truth is that the things I associate with Granny, the stability, the consistency, the familiarity, the reliability, things we feel we've lost, well, in fact, we're blessed to have ever had them at all. So many families have never had the joy of a matriarch to care for, learn from, dance and sing with, to build precious, priceless memories with. And we're so blessed, so lucky, and I am so grateful to have had Granny for as long as I did. She was an inspirational example of how to grow old with grace, dignity, and defiance. Right through to the end, she held her head high. She lived on her own terms and will never truly know what effort she had to put in to achieve that. And while I'm sad for those of us left behind mourning her departure, I'm so extremely happy for Granny, who now doesn't have to suffer in any worldly way whatsoever. So perhaps reunited with all the people she outlived, and there was a lot of them, she's probably sipping a hot toddy and watching all of our trials and tribulations unfold with great enthusiasm, just like she used to watch Dog the Bounty Hunter or Judge Judy, eagerly waiting for the day when we are all reunited once again. So, rest in peace, Granny. Thanks for that, everybody. I appreciate you hanging out and listening to that and giving me that moment. I'm not going to do that awfully embarrassing thing and cry on a live stream. But yeah, she was a real wonderful person, very unique. She touched so many lives. And, the world will never be the same. But to Granny, I should have got a little whiskey prepared. All I have is a cup of lukewarm tea, which she would have hated. She actually never finished a cup of tea because she would only drink it when it was like boiling hot. And by the time that boiling heat had gone out of it, which was about halfway through the cup, she wasn't interested, and so she would never get more than about halfway through a cup of tea. So she's probably not very impressed that I'm cheersing and toasting her with a lukewarm cup of tea here. But you know, I didn't plan that far ahead. This was a last minute kind of decision. But there we go. So on with tonight's show. But I suppose just as the last final message, just to say, you know, treasure the time you've got. Make the most of it. Do something meaningful with it. Even if your family and friends and loved ones and colleagues or whoever it is get on your nerves and bug you and you think they're a lost cause and you can never have a connection with them, you can overlook it. You can move past it. You can be the person who starts to build that bridge and extends that helping hand of kindness and love and compassion and enthusiasm for life and your existence and their existence, and just, you know, put the baggage down. It's heavy. It's giving you a bad back, you know, stretch a little bit and just make the most of all the time you have, because we don't know how much of it we've got. We really don't. And then when it's up, suddenly you get this rude awakening and you start to think, holy moly, did I do as much as I could have done? Did I spend it wisely? Did I visit? Did I call? In my case, I know I didn't. I didn't ring her as much as I should have, and I didn't write as many letters as I should have. And I'm very lucky that she had a very big family and there was lots of other grandchildren to pick up the slack. But the best thing I did was bring William into the world, and she had a chance to meet him before she died. And I think that I'm really glad that I did get that done, at least. So that's good. So yeah, cheers everybody. Thank you very much, and I appreciate you all for being here and sharing that with me. We got Melissa in the chat, showing up late. Shame on you. And Schwam's here as well. What's up, Schwam? Good to have you along for the broadcast. Renata's asking what sun sign was she? That's a tongue twister and a half. I don't know. I'm terrible with birthdays. So I'm not sure. I'll have to look that up and find out from somebody else. Yeah. So we're going to be, and that's, yeah, I don't have anything else planned for an intro or a preamble ramble. We're just going to jump into the book, see what old Zbigniew has to say, and just crack on, because we're still not even halfway through it yet. And this is video number 8. So we got to make some headway. Otherwise, we're never going to get to read Foundations, Their Power and Influence this year. We're on page 105, and we've got 309 pages. So we've got 204 pages to go. We got to pick up the pace, people. And so with that said, let's go over to the book cam and get into it. Hopefully sound is still good. On my side, everything is looking hunky-dory. That's a phrase you don't hear too often, isn't it? Hunky-dory. I'm bringing it back. I wonder where it comes from. Because you know, we say hunk to describe, big muscly, oiled up wrestlers or movie stars or whatever. Dory? I don't know. Hunky dory? If anybody wants to do some on-the-fly investigative research, let us know in the chat what where hunky dory comes from and why we say it. Just an irrelevant tidbit, but it's one of those interesting ones that pops up, you know, when you least expect it, and you go, oh. And then people say, like, why are you watching those 3-hour live streams from that guy who reads books? Like, well, I learned what hunky dory means tonight. And they'll be like, okay, nice, yeah, I see, I get it now. So if you learn nothing else from this 3-hour live stream, you could at least learn a little piece of trivia that might pop up on a pub quiz one day and, you know, win you the esteemed title of pub quiz winner in your local pub. And if you do end up playing, going down to the pub for a quiz, get yourself a hot toddy. Toast my granny. All right, here we are. So we're continuing with historical discontinuity. Hang on, Frank's here. A dory is a boat, ergo a hunky-dory is a big boat. Is that actually true? Actually, I believe you because I know actually, I just said actually far too many times. I know that Frank has built a boat by hand. Fun fact about Frank. So I believe you. So that's what we're saying. We're saying everything is big boat. Nice one, Frank. I appreciate you stepping in there and educating us all. So there you go. That's the today's mission accomplished. We've all learned something, and now we can fumble our way through Zbigniew Brzezinski's book. Maybe we'll pick something else up. So I'll just I'll read through this first sort of 2.5 pages because I did get them on the last video, but I think it was when it started to go a bit dodgy. Lee Blunt says, a fish bodybuilder. Oh, he says the dory part. Frank says the dory part is real. Okay, got you. Thank you. Good to know. I didn't know a dory was a boat. It's a character in the film Finding Nemo. Dory is the forgetful fish that befriends the clownfish who goes on a search for his son. Dory. Okay. Historical discontinuity. In our time, the student generation represents one of the most dynamic variables of change. That's one of those sentences that could have been written here in 2025, but he was actually writing it back in 1970. Oh, hang on, let me get my pencil. The growth in their number, as well as the simultaneous growth in the number of radios, televisions, telephones, which are all items that affect personal relationships, both making possible and encouraging the rapid dissemination of ideas, make for a subjectively dynamic mood that stands in sharp contrast to the relatively slower rate of change in such items as income, national or per capita, the switch from rural to urban employment, the population shift to large urban centres, or the average number of people living in a room. The overall result is the contradiction, already noted in the preceding chapter, between the pace of change in the state of mind and in material reality. In the words of a student of modernization, contemporary man, and this is especially true of the younger generation, quote, is less under the domination of his environment, and to this extent he is freer, but at the same time he is less certain of his purpose, and in times of great unrest he is prepared to surrender his freedom in the interest of purposeful leadership. In that fluid setting, the present becomes difficult to comprehend, since it is no longer defined by either religion or nationalism or historical ideological perspectives. Writing about the waning of the Middle Ages, the historian Johann Huizinga described a world of discontinuity, a world marked by the collapse of traditional beliefs, uncertainty about eternal salvation, widespread pessimism, and intense violence. Psychological refuge was sought by many in mystical cults, while individual behavior was dichotomized, ranging from emphasis on the saintly to indulgence in depravity and cruelty. What's changed, Shifts from one extreme to the other were common, as men desperately sought social anchorage in absorbing commitment. A similar crisis, marked by much more secular forms of expression, occurred again in the West, when nationalism and industrialization combined to change the character of society. Massive national and class conflicts, as well as acute social and psychological tension, spawned all-encompassing ideologies that seemed to provide both authority and a sense of direction. Writing about the cataclysm of World War II, Czesław Miłosz, in The Captive Mind, drew perceptive portraits of Eastern European intellectuals as they moved from one faith to another in a search for the personal stability that their environment failed to provide. Today's mood has many parallels, but it also differs significantly in scope and content. The Industrial Revolution, to say nothing of the culture of the Christian Middle Ages, was territorially confined, and only gradually in the course of more than a century and a half did it spill over to affect more and more societies. Its appearance was accompanied by the rise of nationalism and other secular ideologies, in which broad concepts were reinforced by the institutions embodying them. In contrast, the current crisis of institutionalized belief takes place in the context of the technotronic revolution, a revolution which is not territorial but spatio-temporal. This new revolution almost simultaneously affects the entire globe. You might call it the first global revolution. Maybe. Another word for it. Another name for it. And I've said before that the first global revolution, this book here by the Club of Rome, it's another ridiculously overpriced and expensive paperback book. I'm reading that inside the book club. We are much further along in this book than we are in Zbig's, but it's pretty good. There's a lot of interesting admissions in there, but also a lot of omissions as well. It's always about like identifying the admissions, identifying the omissions, and piecing things together. But it's a good companion to this book, and it's interesting that he uses that phraseology right there on page 107, the new revolution affecting the entire globe, the first global revolution, right? With the result that fads and new forms of behavior move rapidly from society to society. Now, what he does a lot, and he did it up here where he talked about the population shift, the rise of nationalism, the rapid movement of new forms of behavior. He's not acknowledging or admitting or detailing the forces behind those kinds of changes. Nationalism can be dialed up or dialed down. I did rant a little bit about that on the previous video, I think, with the example that what's going on in the UK at the moment and Ireland as well. There's this whole thing with the flags and flying the flags, and they're drumming up the nationalism, but then at the same time, they're painting the people who are doing that as xenophobic, racist bigots who are far-right extremists. And that's been going on a long time in this country. The Union Jack and the St. George's Cross has been associated with like skinhead culture and the British National Party, which tends to be tarred with this brush of racism. Just divide and conquer strategy is my point. And so when you need to, you can drum up the nationalism. You can increase it and get everybody proud to be part of the country. Maybe you want them to join a war effort. Maybe you want them to make some sort of economic sacrifice for the greater good. You turn up the nationalism. You want them to go to war. You want them to pay more taxes. You want them to stand out on the street on a Thursday night and bang pots and pans together to praise the national health socialism system. That's when you turn it up, and then you turn it down at other times. Okay, you turn it down when you want to bring in a load of people from another country and other cultures and have a peaceful kind of melting pot of multiculturalism. And then you turn down the nationalism because the people who are fiercely proud of their country and their culture and their communities and their way of life, they're going to have more of a friction when you bolt and bus and plane in a load of strangers who don't speak the language, who don't have identity documents, who have no purpose, and who just get paid for, right? Frank says, as Alan Watt said, culture is handed down from above, so it's all social engineering. Yeah, great point. So what Zbig does not do, he doesn't talk about that aspect. He just says these things happen, like they're just natural forces, like it's just the seasons changing, kind of the wind blows and the leaves rustle and they fall off the tree and go into the ground. Like it's kind of, that's the omission here, is the acting, the manipulation, the engineering behind that makes these things happen. So that's been a theme all the way through the book, though, and it's a theme all the way through the First Global Revolution. So continuing. And yeah, sorry, just to linger a little bit on this new forms of behavior traveling rapidly from society to society. Well, that's monkey see, monkey do, as Alan Watts says so often. You see it on the television show, you hear it on the radio, then you think it's normal and you repeat it. And then when other people around you are also doing the same thing because they also watched the television and heard it on the radio, you think, oh, good, I'm normal, and what I'm doing is sensible and it's the correct way to behave. And this is how things are like spread rapidly. Prior to these gadgets, you couldn't spread the behaviors quite as rapidly. But that's one of the purposes, one of the functions of these gadgets being made the centerpiece of everybody's living room. You got to have the TV and gather around the TV set, right? And put the television on, and you can walk down the street in the evening and you just see these glowing rectangles filling the room with pulsating light, and a bunch of people kind of slack-jawed staring at it, hypnotized. It's quite sad. But continuing, we're going back to the student generation lives in this new technotronic age, even if in some cases their immediate societies do not. Unlike the industrial age, which required that a society undergo extensive industrialization before the new proletarian class could become socially significant, the spatio-temporal technotronic revolution directly reaches those receptive to it because they have access to communications and because their state of mind is formed by factors outside their immediate social context. That is covered in detail in the 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television by Jerry Mander, which came out around the same time as this. I think 70, what was it, 74? 72? 73? 77. So this came out 7 years later. Fantastic book. There's a lot of cheap copies on eBay at the minute, £5-6 if you don't have a copy yet. Even if you do have a copy, stock up, give one to a friend. But in that book, he talks about how the information that is delivered into our minds by way of the television set becomes more important and more significant to us than our actual lived experience and interaction with actual reality. So when Zbigniew is saying here that the state of mind is formed by factors outside the immediate social context, I think there's a good chance that he's talking about the information being beamed into their minds by way of the television set, and its awareness of atrocities and disasters that are going on in other parts of the world, news stories that are happening in places, things that you can do nothing about, places you're never going to go, people you're never going to meet, but it has you caring about the celebrities and the gossip and the politicians and the situations in other countries, and you end up caring more about that because it's so easily accessible, and you get into this hypnagogic trance when you watch the TV. You end up caring more about all that stuff, like all the people who are going on about the horrific, terrible things that are happening in Gaza, and they are. But some people are 100% and entirely consumed by that, and they're just overlooking horrible things that are going on the doorstep and in their communities and in their cities and towns and villages in the place that they live, where they're from. So that's, I think, what he's getting at here. The mind gets hijacked and focused on all this other stuff that you can't do anything about, but you neglect your actual reality, your actual circumstances, your relationships, your communities, your families, and all that other stuff in the process. Continuing, the contemporary student mass is precisely such a group, and that is why forms of behavior peculiar to Berkeley were within a year repeated elsewhere. West Berlin students even wore sandals in the cold November Central European weather. American student activists studying abroad and highly critical of American society have tended to play an important, energizing role in this process, and are evidence of the extent to which America, the first to experience the technotronic age fully, has replaced Europe as the principal source of social change. And again, describing it like that wasn't the plan. Like America wasn't chosen to be the principal driver of social change, with its Hollywood, with its beaming out of Americanism, American, is that the right word? I don't know, it's not quite the right noun, but the cultural downloads that it was sending out into people's homes, invading their front rooms by way of the television. America was chosen for that purpose. That's where the stars are. That's where Hollywood is, the Hollywood, the magic wand, and where the stars are. and we follow the stars, and the glitz and the glamour and all this other stuff. So he's sort of saying, well, it just happened that America replaced Europe. Not that it was done by design, not that it was done on purpose. Again, omitting that causal determining factor. And I've just seen as well that we've got Turbs over on Rumble, and we've got Thoughtcast as well, who says, good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon to you, sir or madam, whatever you may be. I'm not quite sure, Thoughtcast. But it's good to have you here. I don't think I've seen you on the stream before, so welcome. Continuing. The problem facing the rebels of a century and a half ago was how to integrate meaningfully the unprecedented, incomprehensible changes wrought by the Industrial Revolution. The same problem is posed by the onset of the technotronic age, with its apparent threat to human values, its impersonality, its over-rationalization, its simultaneous intensification of personal experience, and its spatial immediacy to every human suffering anywhere on the globe. And I'll just mention and remind people that this was 1970, so no internet, no social media, no reels, no YouTube shorts, no algorithms, no feeds, none of that. And he was still talking about how human suffering anywhere on the globe would become immediate because of this technotronic era. So it's quite amazing. For many in the 19th century, especially those who were most affected either vicariously or directly by the Industrial Revolution, that is, the intellectuals and the workers, Marxism provided the integrative, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that. I'm going to go with integrative. I'm going to go with integrative. I'm not sure how to stress that, which syllable is stressed in that word. The integrative response. Today, the search is on for some new source of intellectual mooring, and the searchers have begun by rejecting established answers. The younger generation is the one most directly affected by the transition into the new age, and it contains the most active opponents and includes the majority of those who feel themselves to be victims of the technotronic revolution. In their reliance on emotion and violence, many of the opponents are reminiscent of the Luddites of early 19th century England, who reacted to the machine age with primitive passion, destroying that which they did not understand well enough to harness. Yeah, so the Luddites, it wasn't that they saw the harms, the damage, the risk that the technology and the machines represented. No, it's just because they didn't understand how to use it, and they're just ignorant, and painting them as just sort of backward, old-fashioned Luddites. That's what the word has come to represent now. But I think there's a little bit more to it. I think they saw the degradation of the human mind and spirit and humanity that those machines and using them represented, and the whole unimpeded stampede. The unimpeded stampede. That seems like a terrible phrasing. But this enthusiastic barreling into the use of these technologies, which is the same thing we've seen in our lifetime with internet, personal computing, smartphones, and now AI tools, without really much consideration at all for the harm, the loss, the damage, the real threat that they pose to our abilities as human beings, and the whole integrity of our humanity as well is at risk. And so, yeah, I think it's probably an unfair characterization, but what do you expect? Continuing. Often supported by local public opinion, the Luddites, well organized and highly motivated, shattered machines and decried the frequently very real injustices that the machine's appearance had precipitated. Okay, so at least he's acknowledging real injustices, and he's also acknowledging that they were supported by public opinion. The fear, hatred, and incomprehension of the computer current among some people echoes the denunciations of the textile machine a century and a half ago. There you go. It's all down to fear, hatred, and incomprehension. And obviously those things are not good. And therefore, if you don't like computers, you're also not good. You just need to get with the times, man. There is a little footnote for that section. It says, in early February 1969, rioting students in Montreal vented their anger at the, quote, system by destroying with fire axes a $1 million university computer. Whew. Can you believe a computer cost $1 million in 1969? Yeah, that makes sense, but still, fair play to them. That's dedication. But what did it achieve? Like the Luddites, the contemporary opponents of the technological and electronic revolution represent, especially in the more advanced Western states, a response to the new modes of life. The Luddites were threatened by economic obsolescence and reacted against it. Today, the militant leaders of the reaction, as well as their ideologues, frequently come from those branches of learning which are most sensitive to the threat of social irrelevance. Their political activism is thus only a reaction to the more basic fear that the times are against them, that a new world is emerging without either their assistance or their leadership. Footnote says, the insistence on total solutions prompts at the same time their characteristic unwillingness to become involved in the more mundane process of making partial improvements, of gradually adapting new techniques, of really becoming involved in the world. John R. Dagg, in The New French Revolution, which is a 1969 publication, notes this paradox in regard to the French intellectual left. Quote, Sartre and his friends have preached that literature must be engagé? I don't know. Engagé. But in practice, they have always shied away from realistic political action. Sartre and his friends have always demanded utopia or nothing. So the technocrats have stolen the Sartreans' clothes. It's an interesting point that he's making there. Because it's reminding me again of Yuval's useless class that are going to need drugs and computer games to keep them busy because they're going to have no work, right? So these people who are like, these automations that you're installing everywhere that are putting us out of work, and all the treaties and all the offshoring of the production and the factories going to China and whatnot. Well, maybe we can keep some of those jobs, please. And then, you're just old-fashioned Luddites, You're just fearful and angry, and you need to embrace change and progress, because progress is always good. Get with the times. Stop complaining. But continuing, the attraction that a segment of the younger generation in the more developed world now feels toward poetry, lyricism, and emotion, and their contempt for reason and intellectual concepts may be indicative not so much of one tradition replacing another, but rather of a clash between emotion and necessity. On the one hand are the feelings and attitudes prompted by the breakdown of institutionalized beliefs, and intensified by the new modes of communication, all stimulating or creating an overwhelming desire for emotional escape, or at least emotional release through concrete feelings and associations. On the other hand is the tedious necessity to master by intensive conceptualization the techniques of computers, mathematics, systems control, and the like, on which the resolution of many contemporary social problems depends. Systems control, that's an interesting term I haven't really heard before. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Like bringing out these technologies so you can control the systems that we all live in. There's a footnote. Compare, in this connection, Noam Chomsky's attacks on the new breed of American intellectual experts in his book, American Power and the New Mandarins, with the attacks on Plato, who was accused of the sin of intellectualizing reality. There are other tantalizing parallels to ancient Athens. The author of a recent study of the impact of Plato's philosophy on the society of his time argues that the term philosopher was relatively new and was used by Plato to identify the man who is prepared to challenge the hold of the concrete over our consciousness and to substitute the abstract. The concentration on the abstract was associated with the appearance of a new technique of communication, the written, which first supplemented and then displaced the antecedent oral tradition. Epic poetry relied on narrative, which both stimulated and depended on emotionally shared experience. The more abstract categorization of reality became possible with the introduction of the alphabet and writing, and it opened the doors of history to conceptualization. Both Christianity and Marxism stepped through these doors. I feel like you could unpack that footnote for the next 45 minutes. There is so much in there to talk about, but I'm going to just carry on. Though this clash may be a profound one, it is doubtful whether the student generation represents a new revolutionary class of the 20th century. A truly revolutionary class must master the contemporary techniques of social organization rather than reject them. This may be difficult for the student revolutionary class to do, since it is necessarily transitional in character and subject to constant change. This does not preclude the possibility that student militants might well opt out of society permanently and become, especially after hardening prison experience, professional revolutionaries, and that the inflow of new students may keep alive the feelings of restlessness and rebellion. It is not, however, certain that the older ex-student revolutionaries will be able to maintain their ties with the new generation of younger students from whom they will be increasingly separated by age. They will run the risk of becoming rebels outside of a class. Each student generation will then have to create its own leadership, its own aspirations and techniques, before it too fades from the scene. It is perhaps no accident that history is, after all, a cemetery of revolutionary youth movements. Moreover, the coming waves of students may enter an environment gradually becoming more willing to tolerate the existence of altogether deviant subcultures and offering social support even to those who choose to divorce themselves from society. That's an interesting little bit, isn't it? Deviant subcultures. Are we seeing any of those in the present day? Well, for 1 month every year, we tend to see a lot of those. And then also this bit about supporting those who choose to divorce themselves from society. I mean, isn't there a phenomenon going on where, I want to say Japan, where people are just giving up on society and they're just playing computer games and hanging out with their AI chatbot girlfriends, and they're just not bothering to engage in the real world anymore. And yet there's all this internet content geared towards that, whether it's computer games or esports, which are just competitive computer games, or television, streaming services, films, interviews, podcasts, all this stuff. You can just lock yourself away from reality and just mainline entertainment from now until the day you die. And that's kind of, what is it? It's kind of acceptable. It's normal. At least to be mainlining some sort of entertainment on the regular is normal. And, oh, did you see that new series on Netflix? No, I don't watch television. What? You know, people back away slowly, staring at you like, you just said he doesn't watch television. Stay away from him. But deviant subcultures and then social support for people who are divorcing themselves from society. This is inclusivity, right? Continuing. Many of the contemporary younger rebels, especially those who are pathological rather than political in their motivation, may well choose that path. Finally, as social change contributes to the spread of education and knowledge, the distinctive characteristics of the student may be blurred. As society becomes more knowledge-oriented and the student more socially involved, the gap between student life and society will narrow. Nevertheless, the challenge of the student generation as a whole to rigid hierarchies and institutionalized beliefs and to the social order of the industrial age has had the effect of reopening the more basic questions concerning the purposes of social organization. What should be the balance between the internal and the external qualities of life? What is the relationship of personal liberty to social equality? These questions acquire a new meaning and call for new definitions whenever a major historical crisis dominates our consciousness of reality. That's the end of the chapter. I've enjoyed this discussion and study of students and student movements and groups and whatnot. Just smiling because I can hear William in the background. Sounds hungry. Yeah, I've enjoyed this discussion. I think revolutionary movements are always started by the controllers for the purposes of advancing things to the next stage of the plan. I don't really believe so much in real grassroots groups and revolutions. Alan Watt teaches that there are no authentic grassroots movements, really. And as he said in the book just now, that what did he say? Like, history is a graveyard of revolutionary youth movements. They don't last. They don't get picked up. They don't get supported unless they serve the agenda. So I'm thinking of Just Stop Oil, for example. They're allowed to do their thing and throw paint on priceless works of art and glue themselves to the roads and do all that stupid stuff that they do that just annoys normal people. And then they get all the publicity and they get access to do all these stunts. And that cause is allowed, encouraged, supported by the establishment, accepted by the establishment. Just like the Black Lives Matter marches were accompanied by police who protected them and looked after them and helped them, you know, and so that's telling you that these movements are approved by the establishment. Because if you can get your sign and walk through Bristol city centre protected by the police, then your movement is approved. And therefore, if it's approved, you know it ain't going to do anything or make any difference apart from maybe have some sort of impact that is planned and desired by the people who run the sort of systems and societies that we live in, right? So that's how you know. And I think the groups that maybe are authentic, maybe are truly revolutionary, maybe do have some potential to spark change or gather momentum. I think they get infiltrated and they get dismantled very quickly. And it is not too difficult to imagine how that happens, right? People are trained in this sort of subversion, and you just pose as somebody. You see it in TV show all the time, right? There's a famous film, The Departed, which is actually a remake of a film from Hong Kong called Infernal Affairs, which is actually better than the American remake and much shorter. But you know, it's about the crime, the criminals. They groom this young boy to be a policeman, and he goes into the police and works for them, and vice versa. The police they groom this. They have this young police man who goes undercover in the criminal family, you know, the gang. So these methods are revealed to us through entertainment, and then we're supposed to think they just don't use them in the real world, in reality. Okay, if you want to believe that, then yeah, you can go ahead and believe that. That's fine. Believe what you want to believe. There's a book. There's a book I do not have, but I can recommend. I'll try and dig it up nice and quick. It's called... It's down here somewhere. I've got, on my Amazon page, I've got 529 items in my saved for later list. And they're all books, as you could probably guess. But this book is supposed to be really good. About true story of Britain's secret police undercover. And it's pretty cheap. You can get it for less than £2. Rob Evans, Paul Lewis, True Story of Britain's Secret Police Undercover. I haven't read it. It was just recommended by someone who I know is widely read and runs a Telegram channel with lots of interesting, rare books and a website, in fact, where you can download copies of those interesting rare books. But this was recommended, so I can tell people about it, put it on your radar. For less than £2, what do you got to lose? The delivery actually costs more than the book if you buy it used. So yeah, of course, these tactics occur in reality, and a lot of the time, if you see them in films and various entertainment programs or whatever, then I think it's a safe bet that they're telling you this is how it's done in reality. So it's not hard to imagine that authentic groups and grassroots movements get infiltrated, taken over, subverted, and destroyed from within. I mean, when I was back during lockdowns during the Big C, I joined a few groups and we met up, and there were strange characters who would come to those meetings, and some people would be very, very strongly, very opinionated, and they would try and steer people in a certain direction, and so you could kind of observe the dynamics and start to be suspicious of who might be the plant, who might be the undercover agent that wanted you to all go in a certain direction that would be bound to get the group unwanted attention and shut down. And so you can see it happening in real life groups. You can see it happening in online groups, especially on Telegram, when people get activated and they start getting, obsessed with certain things that can get the group shut down in a moment's notice. Doris says, Ned Ludd, a textile worker, 19th century. He and his followers opposed new machinery and technology and destroyed some of it in raids. And then Doris says, mainlining entertainment is a good phrase. Yes, you can have that one. So we got chapter 4, and just a reminder that we're in part 2 of the book. So this is part 2, chapter 4. And this section is ideas and ideals beyond ideology. Snappy title. This is page 1111. The 19th century can be said to represent the intellectual supremacy of the idea of liberty. Really? But the 19th, did I read that right? But the 20th century is witnessing the triumph of equality. For most people, liberty found its political embodiment in the nation, and only for relatively few was it in procedural guarantees for the individual. The last century was therefore primarily the time of nationalism and only secondarily of liberal democracy. The search, because they always blame nationalism. They always blame the world wars on nationalism, right? And this is always the argument, like, this is why we need the League of Nations, and this is why we need the United Nations, because nationalism, we can't have nationalism anymore, because look what it did. Look what it did to, look at all this death and pain and suffering that it caused. The search for forms in which the idea of equality can be expressed is currently the strongest motivating impulse behind the activities of university students in the West and of youthful critics of the privileged communist elites. It also guides relations between blacks and whites, both in the United States and in Africa, and between the richer and the poorer countries. We have thus reached the stage in mankind's history where the passion for equality is a universal, self-conscious force. What? There you go. It's just a natural force, not at all artificial, not at all being pushed from the top down, not at all being spread by way of indoctrination and propaganda. Nope, it's just a universal, self-conscious force. Quite new agey, actually, phrasing it that way. What is more, since equality is not likely to be attained on the objective plane, it may be sought more and more on the subjective plane. With real equality impossible, equality through emotion becomes a substitute, with passionate conflict and hostility creating the illusion of equality. Well, what a paragraph. I feel like that could also give us a 30-minute exploration into the ideas he's communicating there, but it's this like we ain't getting it on the objective plane, so we're going to have to go for the subjective plane. And then this is how you get my lived experience, right? And what is my truth and the truth of my lived experience, and this highlighting and glorifying and lifting up and raising up of that subjectivity, that subjective aspect of reality, and that ignoring and that denial of the objective truth of reality that we all live in. And this part of this is what leads to moral subjectivity, right? Subjective morality, where it's okay to kill a few thousand people if you save a few million. This kind of thing. These sort of questions and quandaries. That's the problem with emphasizing the subjective over the objective, right? And then I like how he says this: the illusion of equality ends up in passionate conflict and hostility, which is what you get. You get all these leftist, pink-haired clownfish types yelling and screaming and breaking down and crying, and not being able to just have a conversation, right? They get whipped up into a frenzy. The students, remember this discussion of students. The students get whipped up. They get indoctrinated by all these leftist professors and teachers, and then they start to riot. They get pallets of bricks delivered, and they call themselves anti-fascists, and then they go out, smash up businesses, and loot trainers from department stores. And they call themselves revolutionaries, right? And it's so fake and phony and controlled and blatantly planned that it's amazing people fall for it. It's not that amazing people fall for it. They're young, they're impressionable, and this is known that they are. That's why they're the targets, right? The older people are not going to fall for it. But yeah, I quite like that little paragraph that he put in there. Apart from that woo-woo bit about the universal self-conscious force of our passion for equality. Anyway, next section, the quest for equality. The passion for equality is strong today because, for the first time in human history, inequality is no longer insulated by time and distance. Nationalism spread during a century and a half as populations gradually became politicized as a side effect of literacy and industrialization. Yes, nothing to do with propaganda and indoctrination. But the rejection of inequality within and between nations has become the dominant mood in a mere matter of decades. In this regard, as in the rebellion of the younger generation, the appearance of global communication and of newly educated masses is the decisive stimulus. Accordingly, the relationship between the technotronic age and the passion for equality, if not the idea of equality itself, is quite causal. From the standpoint of generating social and political motivation, it is a matter of enormous import that, quote, the poor live as much in the new software multi-billion-dollar service environment of world information as the wealthy do. National oppression and class oppression had to be direct and personal before they could generate counter-reaction. Today, the sense of inequality can be vicarious and nevertheless extraordinarily intense because it can be magnified beyond the level of personal experience. But though the commitment to the idea of equality currently commands the greatest allegiance, the definition of equality remains elusive. In the communist states, the struggle for political equality involves the desire to do away with the right to rule as a privilege of only a few, with the right to read and to travel freely as a professional prerogative of only those at the top of the power elite, with the right to buy what one desires as an advantage enjoyed only by those on governmental assignments abroad, or with access to special stores for high officials. Nevertheless, Communist Party leaders, who have long assumed that the elimination of propertied classes would automatically ensure social equality as the basis for personal liberty, find this desire for libertarian equality difficult to comprehend. In the new and developing states, the difficulty in defining equality is compounded by the fact that in most cases, Complaints result not only from immediate social inequities, but from an acute sense of deprivation vis-à-vis the developed world. The small size of many of the new states further intensifies their feeling of impotence and complicates the task of redress. Their economic dependence on unstable commodity markets and foreign capital means that their liberty is highly relative and tenuous. The result is a condition in which liberty seems threatened by the absence of international equality. It is the desire for equality that has made most of the leaders of the new states embrace socialism. They see in socialism a vehicle for ensuring the objectives which most of them share: the flowering of their nation's own distinctive cultures, national economic development, and the gradual erosion of internal and external inequality. Their socialism shares the Marxist analysis of capitalism and the Leninist description of imperialism, though the leaders tend to stress that their economic approach avoids the errors not only of capitalism but of communism as well. Indeed, some leaders have claimed that their socialism, less dogmatic and enriched by indigenous traditions, would provide the world with a more humane alternative than either the doctrinaire materialism of communism or the social indifference of the corporate West. Writing just before the attainment of independence in Kenya, Tom Mboya, in discussing the African concept of socialism, declared that eventually Africa will show the rest of the world what freedom really means. These views, however, remain essentially unstructured and unsystematized. Though they have been described by some scholars as an ideology, they tend to lack the systematic, coherent, integrated, and intellectually sustained character of either socialism or communism. And there is an absence of formal dogmas and institutional embodiment. Though they back their views by undemocratic political power and phrase them in a terminology largely derived from Marxism, and though they are necessarily preoccupied with improving man's economic life, the leaders of the new nations tend to lay stress on the preeminence of nationhood and of the spiritual importance of the human being. This is also true of the new indigenous intellectuals, those in the social layer immediately below the present third world leaders, who tend to be even more radical in their outlook, more susceptible to racist appeals, and highly emotional in behavior. Their ecstatic Marxism is a far cry from either the scholasticism of Marx or the organizational single-mindedness of Lenin. Moreover, the experience of several years of independence has had a chilling effect on those who originally saw in the new nations an expression of a more humane vision and an example for others. In many of the new states, the ruling elites have restricted liberty on the ground that such restriction is necessary to fight inequality, by eliminating privilege on the home front and by mobilizing national efforts to bridge the widening gap between the nation and the outside world. The passion for equality has in some places been debased into a racial nationalism that finds its expression in the expulsion of non-native tribesmen, Chinese from Indonesia, Asians from East Africa, and more generally in a xenophobic and even racial resentment of the developed white world as the principal exploiter. The new political elites have shown a strong propensity toward conspicuous consumption at some expense to their social consciousness. The problem of equality poses itself rather differently in the more developed and prosperous countries. There, particularly in the United States, it has taken the form of opposition to bigness in institutions and vested interests. Opponents of bigness argue that the political process is deceptive because the one man, one vote formula merely obscures the underlying inequality of power between the individual and, for example, the corporations. More specifically, the notion of equality, rather than that of liberty, has been at the heart of the civil rights struggle in the United States. Formal liberty has been gradually and painfully obtained by the blacks with the passage of civil rights legislation, particularly legislation guaranteeing the right to vote. That liberty, however, hardly assures the blacks' equality in America, and the black man's struggle today is to obtain the equality that the white man already possesses. Defining that equality is precisely what perplexes the college president or the city manager to whom liberty has traditionally been synonymous with equality. The social tensions in the developed world, and this is true of some communist countries as well as of more pluralistic societies, highlight the difficulty of seeking equality purely on the external and material plane. After several centuries of social activism which emphasized the external man, contemporary man in the advanced industrial countries confronts a crisis of self-definition for which he finds no satisfactory answers in either established religion or ideology. With the gradual fading of nationalist and ideological passions, inner certitude and external commitment have yielded to inner ambiguity and external uncertainty. Woo. Some big ideas in ideas and ideals beyond ideology. I'm going to have a sip. And I'm still having issues on Odyssey. It's buffering, so the stream is about 10 minutes behind where we're at. And I don't know why it does that. I have no idea. It's kind of frustrating. I wish I knew how to fix it, because I would like to be a fan of Odyssey, but recently it's been a bit crap, I have to say. So, socialism, capitalism, communism, it all ends up with the same thing, doesn't it, really? Tiny elite, massively wealthy, powerful, and influential, keeping lots of goodies for themselves and making everybody else compete and scrap and scramble around for whatever's left. I think these isms are not very helpful unless you are very good at defining what you mean by a capitalist society or a communist society or a socialist society. Because what I see in most places is just a pyramid structure, a pyramid system with the goodies, the money, the wealth going up, up, up into the hands of the few, and everybody else having to be saddled with debt, whether that's personal or national debt, which is added on to, the children, the grandchildren, the great-great-grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. It's enslavement, in other words. And there's always a dominant minority at the top. And, the bankers never really get it. By get it, I mean get the blame. The whole money system, the printing of the money, the control of it, the management of it, the fabulous wealth and riches that go to the people who sit atop that system of just fractional reserve lending and usury and debt slavery. It's it's just the same system everywhere over and over again with a different label slapped on it. It's just certain systems kill more people than others, and that the number of deaths that happen under these pyramidal systems does vary greatly depending on which ism is described, which label is applied, I should say. So that was an interesting survey there, and that admission that these countries are trying socialism, and then it just ends with a really wealthy small clique sitting at the top, and other people don't really get it. So pretty interesting. And this last bit as well about the social tensions in the developed world was quite curious, because he's talking about the fading of nationalism, the breakdown of institutionalized beliefs. Religions aren't serving people. Marxism's not really serving people. And white people are being demonized by these poorer countries. This all plays in really well to the first global revolution, because they say time and time again in this book that it's up to the wealthy, developed, rich northern countries, which are predominantly historically populated by white people. It's up to those countries to take the hit while the non-white countries, the poorer countries, catch up and are allowed to go through the same industrialization process that we've already been through and benefited from. But now we need to stop, halt our development, halt our economic productivity. We in fact, we need to reverse it. We need to go stagnant. We need to start deindustrializing. And we've got a moral imperative and duty to do that while the other countries are allowed to catch up and use the fossil fuels that we're not allowed to use and build the coal power plants, power stations that we're not allowed to use. They frame it as this, I suppose it's like the opposite of the white man's burden. So instead of us being great and having to go out and improve everybody else, it's like, actually, you had your time in the sun. Now you got to step aside, and it's time for you to be poor and at the bottom of the pile for a change. And that's just interesting, sort of another interesting parallel. If anyone can read these two books in quick succession, side by side, I think you will find a lot of interesting overlaps. They're certainly writing from the same sort of point of view, although I'd say First Global Revolution is an easier read, and it's targeted at a more general audience. This is pretty academic and niche, and tough going. But Alan, what CTTM, Melissa says, it's all Odyssey's problem. Oh, thank you. I'm glad to know that, because that's what I was thinking. But it's only started recently. It never used to do that. The Odyssey stream used to keep up, no problem, with the others. So I don't know what they've done. I might just stop streaming there and upload a replay after the fact. So sorry to you if you're watching on Odyssey, but I think people have given up watching me on Odyssey at this point because it always stutters. Frank Lennon says, perhaps this is rather simplistic, but to me the basics suggest that if you can provide goods or services that people want to buy, then happy days. Yeah, it's when the group of people calling themselves government comes along and demands 20% on that transaction. That's the problem, isn't it? ESP, hello, good to see you. Why is it always cloudy when I get my time in the sun? I feel like there's a paradox in that sentence. You're not in the sun if it's cloudy. Unless there's something else that I'm not picking up on. Quite a cryptic question you've just thrown into the chat there. But it's good to have you here. So the next bit we're going to be continuing with is syncretic belief. When Michel Foucault proclaimed the death of man, he was expressing in almost Nietzschean terms the pessimism inherent in the reaction against Promethean ideologies. See what I mean? Like, Zbig just drops these sentences, and I'm like, I'm not entirely sure who Michel Foucault is. I know Nietzsche proclaimed God was dead, and there's more to the quote than that, but that's a little snippet that always gets repeated. I know Prometheus is kind of a Luciferian type of figure, gave fire to humanity and was punished for it, so gave this tool, this knowledge to humanity, and was then punished for it by having his liver pecked out by a vulture or something every day. I think that was him. He was on a cliffside getting his liver pecked out every day, but then it would grow back and then it would get pecked out again. So yeah, just that kind of sentence. There's so much to unpack and interpret, and we could be here all day if I slowed down the pace a bit, so I'll try not to. But there is a footnote here which says, this pessimism has been summarized in Robert Bailey's Sociology Faces Pessimism, 1958, in 10 propositions, contrasting the European zeitgeist of 100 years ago with that of today. Okay. So when it says today, this is 1958. So 100 years ago, so that would be 1858. Remember the 19th century, that was the century of, what did he call it? The century of liberty? Or the century of freedom? And then the 20th century was all about nationalism. So, 100 years ago, the European zeitgeist said, there is progress. In 1958, there is no progress. Social evolution is linear. In 1958, they said, social evolution is cyclical. 1858, Western civilization is moving continually toward greater heights in cultural and social development. And in 1958, 100 years later, Western civilization is in a period of disintegration and decline. In 1858, man is rational. In 1958, man is non-rational or irrational. So you can kind of see where this is going. I don't think I need to read all 10 propositions. But you've gone from optimism to pessimism. Oh, that's an interesting one. Number 9 on the next page here. Number 9, society is ruled by the consent of the people. Back in 1858. And then by 1958, society is ruled by the elite. So there you are. Interesting. Might be a good book to get hold of. Sounds like a good study. Sociology faces pessimism. We'll go back to the text. That reaction, in turn, reflects the scientific complexity of modern society, which stimulates a feeling of futility and impotence on the part of the individual. Foucault's views, associated with a school of thought called structuralism, there's a new ism for you, have been characterized by a critic as the ideology of contemporary technocracy. For Foucault sees man as the object of a process which deprives him of any autonomy and rules him impersonally according to a structural dynamic. Sometimes I wonder if, like, Zbigniew is quoting Foucault here to communicate to us his opinion, his view, without saying it's his view and his opinion. Right? So Foucault says man is the object of a process and therefore has no autonomy because he's being impersonally ruled by structuralism, which is a contemporary technocracy. Also, it's interesting to just see that word technocracy used here. So I feel like he's kind of quoting Foucault, telling us his view without owning it himself, right? But I think Foucault sounds like he was actually onto something here. This reminds me of Norbert Wiener's Human Use of Human Beings, right? The cybernetics, this whole discipline, an area of study. Not that Foucault's onto something, as in he's right, just that these ideas are held by the controlling class, the world controllers, right? They want this. They don't want humans to be individuals with free will. They want them to be predictable cogs in systems that they control. And they want to know the outcomes and the actions that people are going to take before we know them ourselves. This is why there's so much surveillance and data gathering and massive amounts of energy being poured into computing that can do the pre-crime that we saw in the Tom Cruise film Minority Report, which is a Philip K. Dick story, I think, before it was a film. But continuing, the rejection of conscious history, thus striking at the heart of the ideological religious approach that has dominated Western thinking, is itself a reflection of the contemporary crisis in values, assumptions, and beliefs, and of the collapse of all integrated and simultaneously purposive historical interpretations. There's a footnote there. Structuralism also involves a critique of Sartre's existentialism, which, in its stress on individual moral autonomy, was itself a reaction to the ideological emphasis on the individual's submissive identification with collective and purposive history making. You got me twice with that new word there, purposive. Centuries ago, in the great religions, man defined the norms that ought to guide the relations among men. I mean, that's interesting you said man defined the norms, because I think if you actually talked to, I don't know, the priests and the imams and the rabbis, they'd probably tell you that God actually defined those norms, and that's what, was revealed, and it was written down in the holy text and all that kind of stuff. But That's probably deliberate, maybe a dig, or just him revealing to us there his sort of atheistic, materialistic type of view on things. But yeah, man defined the norms. Now, for the first time in recorded history, man is beginning, though just beginning, to liberate himself from the oppressive struggle to survive as a physical being. It's starting to sound a little bit Gnostic now, isn't it? This kind of like, oh, you've got to survive as a physical being, and how oppressive that is to be weighed down with all this material, all this stuff, all this physicality, all these laws of cause and effect, which govern our well-being, the well-being of our meat bodies. You know, don't you want to be free of all that, liberated from it? But he says this has prompted a renewed concern with the more elusive spiritual aspects of existence. And there's a little footnote here. In the words of one of the participants in the Harvard University program on technology and science, with the advent of the affluent industrial societies, science tends to replace economic productivity as a primary social goal. As science is able more and more to satisfy its material needs with less human effort, it becomes more preoccupied with the spiritual and intellectual needs. It must develop new goals and aspirations in order to remain viable as a social order. Many times in the past, scientists have believed that all the significant questions had been answered, and the only task remaining was to fill in the details, to work out the full ramifications of the conceptual structure whose main framework was completely delineated. Yet, each time the expectation has proved to be wrong. Each new major advance has revealed an unexpected new world, a new conceptual structure embedded in the old and subsuming it. Scientism eventually has to start turning on the spiritual aspects of existence. But continuing here, it says, it has also created a state of agitation in which systematic dialogue increasingly breaks down because of the lack of shared assumptions. Naturally, this is especially true of the intellectual community, though the reaction gradually communicates itself to the body politic. As a consequence, the majority of people abide by procedural political order only as long as that order works, but they have less and less internal commitment to it. The passive behavior of the French people during the May 1968 collapse of political order is a case in point. To be sure, there is much discussion today of the need to reassert human values, of the priority of man against the tyranny of political despots, or dehumanizing technocrats. Oh, interesting there, isn't it? That he acknowledges dehumanizing technocrats as a threat to human values. But in our time, as opposed to the situation in eras when religion or ideology was dominant, the means, the forms, and the inner significance of these goals remain extraordinarily undefined. The International Philosophical Congress in Vienna in 1968 was, for example, dominated by the view that contemporary philosophy must be in the forefront of the struggle, but how it was to contribute was never specified. Melissa from Alan Watt CTTM says, E. Michael Jones has written and spoke extensively about Foucault. Look into his assertions about Foucault's role in sexual revolution. He claims CIA studied Foucault in the 80s to shape political and social control mechanisms. Ooh, that's a juicy tidbit. Thank you for sharing that. Continuing, it is doubtful, therefore, whether the growing concern with the abstract and the spiritual, and even the evidences of new interest in religiosity, in other words, all matters subsumed under the term the quality of life, will in the near future lead to the emergence of new formal ideologies or religions. Scientific complexity and skepticism, reinforced by the impressionistic efforts of increased reliance on audio-visual communication, television, work against the systematic and dogmatic qualities of an ideology. In this sense, it's therefore right to speak of the end of ideology. Religion and ideology were part of an age in which reality was still dogmatically compressible into intellectualized compartments. Both were reinforced by the urgent desire to translate the ideal into the real. What more probably lies ahead is a turn toward more personal, less structured, more subjectively defined attempts at a synthesis of the scientific and the spiritual, though perhaps nothing quite so mystical as Teilhard de Chardin's thinking. In any case, this appears to be the trend among contemporary Christian and revisionist Marxist thinkers. Right, so more personal, less structured, more subjectively defined attempts at a synthesis of the scientific and the spiritual. That is interesting. I didn't expect him to talk about the spiritual at all. So this is quite curious. Though it is individually enriching, there is the danger that this development might work against the durability of liberal democracy. Intelligent confusion and political disagreement, to say nothing of simple insecurity, might well stimulate a search for external sources of stability, which would take the form of either repression or the bestowal of confidence on a dominant personality. Moreover, quote, a society that carries eclecticism to the point where not only the total culture, but the individual consciousness becomes a mere congeries of disassociated elements, will find it impossible to make a collective decision as to what man shall make of man. That's a hell of a quote, isn't it? I feel like we're there. Disassociated elements. Individual consciousness becomes a mere congeries of disassociated elements. I got to look up the word congeries. Apologies, but as I said on a previous stream, you know a book's good if it's making you turn to the dictionary on the regular, and this is one of those. Congeries. Oh, I got the pronunciation right. Nice. A collection of items or parts in one mass, assemblage, aggregation, heap. Why not just say aggregation then? Okay. So that idea is quite fitting. It reminds me a little bit of Melissa, the story you told of Alan and his assertion that you and other people are kind of congeries of what's the full phrase? Disassociated elements. Because a lot of what makes up who we are, we've just downloaded from a variety of sources, be that our favorite sitcom, a novel, a relationship with a family member, friendship, a teacher, something we read. We grab all these little bits, we download them, and we become congeries of disassociated elements. All these elements that come from this variety of places, some fictional, some scripted, some designed by Tavistock Institute and other social engineering hotbeds. And that leads to a kind of internal chaos where you're not coherent with yourself and you have conflicting bits of personality that rub up against each other and cause friction, and you have this disharmony inside you. And I'm sure that applies to many people, because the solution to that is to do that deep internal work and go through a process such as the self-therapy book that I've talked about many times, or do some shadow work, or I don't know exactly which methods are legit and which ones are just bogus. But this is a book that I do like to recommend because I got a lot of benefit from using it. Self-therapy, get in there and meet the different parts of yourself and iron out those contradictions. Try to make it so that your thoughts, your emotions, your actions are coherent and there's no conflict there, so that you're not thinking one thing and then doing another thing, and this leads to like this internal state of stress, which is just terrible for your health. And then other people look at you and see a hypocrite, and they say, well, you know, he goes around saying this thing is important, and then he goes and does this action which totally is the opposite of what he says, right? And then it'll mess with your feelings as well, because you'll be having inappropriate emotions at stimulus that trigger you, or you'll be calm about things that should enrage you, and you're not properly calibrated to reality. So it's very interesting that he's mentioned that as a problem, because I think he's absolutely on the money. Schwam says this is what Bill Gates' parents read to him as his bedtime story. I do feel like this is like a training manual for those kinds of people, the public figures. That's how I'm kind of thinking of this book. Like, this might be something you give to like Tony Blair, or the Rhodes Scholars, or the people who study at LSE, London School of Economics. This is kind of for them. It's like, take in everything in this book and repeat this, because this is it's the party line, so to speak. But still, some admissions that I think are quite frank and telling. Not you, Frank. Frank as in candid. So, continuing. Though it is individually enriching, there is the danger that this development might work against the durability of liberal democracy. Intellectual confusion and political disagreement, to say nothing of simple insecurity, might well stimulate a search for external sources of stability, which would take the form of either repression or the bestowal of confidence on a dominant personality, such as, the Trump, I would say, is a dominant personality that people have become extremely confident in, or I suppose were right before he got elected and started doing all the stuff that he was supposed to do from the start, But continuing. Moreover, a society that carries eclecticism to the point where not only the total culture, but the individual consciousness becomes a mere... Oh, no, I have read all this bit already, sorry. Congeries of disassociated elements. For some reason, I thought we were back up here. Anyway, it's good to go through it again. So this quote again. A society that carries eclecticism to the point where not only the total culture but the individual consciousness becomes a mere congeries of disassociated elements will find it impossible to make a collective decision as to what man shall make of man. So you've got this subjectivism reigns supreme. Everyone's got their own personal lived experience, their own truth. And it just means nobody's on the same page about anything. It makes it very difficult to build relationships with people, to build trusting, long-lasting, durable, authentic connections, because we're all these kind of patchwork, mosaic personalities that are incoherent internally. And we've all got our little... selection of things we believe and treasure and talk about and say and care about, and we've become so kind of individuated in a way that it's hard to connect with people, or it can be very hard to connect with people who have a totally different worldview or belief system or ethic, or their version of morality is totally incompatible with your morality. So many different things and problems that come out of this. And that, that's not to say that a kind of a collective truth is better, because then you're just in the Borg. You're just in the hive mind when everybody thinks and believes exactly the same thing all the time, right? So it's that tricky sort of tension there between like the individual and the collective, the zeitgeist of the times that you live in. It's a hard thing to navigate, as I'm sure most people on this channel probably will know through their daily lived experience, to use a cringeworthy, horrible term. But to go back to the text, he says, a leader can then be a substitute for the integrative tasks of society, which are otherwise performed by either a formal or an implicitly shared ideology. In the absence of social consensus, society's emotional and rational needs may be fused. Mass media make this easier to achieve in the person of an individual who is seen as both preserving and making the necessary innovations in the social order. This is a really good paragraph here. He's telling you how people get fixated on characters such as the Trump. Given the choice between social and intellectual disorder, and by this is not meant anything that even approaches a revolutionary situation, and authoritarian personal leadership, it's very probable that even some present constitutional and liberal democratic societies would opt for the latter. Well, very probable indeed. In fact, it's happened. But yeah, what an amazingly powerful paragraph that one is. That's, if I was tabbing this book up as I went along, I would stick a tab on page 118. And, you know, I would encourage people to get a screen grab there, because that is really, this is the kind of knowledge that is known by the social engineers and the people who plan societies and the think tanks and the policymakers and the institutes and the groups and the foundations and whatnot. Like this is the kind of knowledge that they know. They know how to move a society to become fixated on some sort of strong man leader, right? They know how to wield the mechanisms of media and publishing and print and but even like gossip, right? Even putting your people down on the ground in the pubs and the bars and the coffee shops and spreading news and stories and anecdotes, and not so much these days. It's all social media, algorithm, AI mediated type stuff. But back in the 70s, you probably had more people out in the communities spreading. There's a word that I'm grasping for and I can't quite get it. Like stories, anecdotes, you know, narratives, and spreading it word of mouth that way, knowing that people would stand around and chatter and gossip pre-television anyway. Now, in the Technotronic era, you just got a television and you just condition people to sit down every night at 6 o'clock and get the download of information, and this is what you got to think, and this is your new opinion for the week, and this is your hot topic to go and argue with your colleagues about tomorrow. But they know how to get people whipped up into a frenzy, and like always, they do the divide and conquer. They do the dialectic. They know it's going to be a Marmite type situation, a love-hate thing, and the people who love him will get on board and be like fiercely loyal to the very bitter end, no matter what he does. And the people who hate him are going to be angry, and each side is going to have ample evidence to back up their opinion. This is the thing that people don't realize, that people on both sides of any of these dialectics have loads and loads of evidence that they can point to back up why their position, why they hold their position. And this is the genius of it, because evidence is supplied to both sides, right? So you can pounce on the moves that Trump's made in office, first term, second term, and the things that he's done that other presidents haven't been able to do, right? The things he's defunded or the agreements he's withdrawn from. But then on the other side, you got all the quotes and the things he said and the controversies he's been involved in and the funding lines and the whatever. So both sides always have like a mountain of evidence. And it's only when you go in and you look at the evidence on both sides and you go, okay, I see what's going on here. This is like a construct. This is a deliberate divide and conquer strategy. And, when the game is rigged, the only winning move is not to play. But then you're tinfoil hat wearing crazy conspiracy theorist. All right, we've got about 2.5 pages left in this chapter, and then we might wrap it. We'll see. The temptation to choose security as an alternative to complexity may grow in the years ahead because the end of ideology, far from diminishing the importance of ideas and ideals in politics, is ushering in an age in which abstract issues concerning the meaning of personal and social life are again becoming central. It is precisely because institutionalized beliefs no longer both confine and define the framework of the dialogue that the dialogue is becoming more intense and far-ranging. The result is a renewed conflict of ideas, but not of institutionalized ideologies, renewed interest in religiosity, but not in organized religions. I think that's a really good point. I'd phrase it more like people are just getting sucked into religions, but they don't know their religions, right? So the Gaza thing might be one. This kind of like there's a symbol, there's a behavior, there's a set of beliefs, because you don't really know what's going on over there. We're in the age of AI generated footage and audio, and that goes. And how long has it been deployed and used against us? We won't even know. So unless you've been over there and had a look and seen all this stuff, I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm not saying don't doubt it and it's all illusory. I'm saying you can't know for sure. We can't know for sure anymore. We're in that era of you can't trust video and audio. And one thing for sure is that people are being driven to absolute distraction with this. And all the footage that came up. It's like we talked a few weeks back about the 2 murders that I saw, when I never look for gory content ever. And then in the same afternoon, I saw 3 videos of people being murdered. The Charlie Kirk thing and the I don't know the girl's name, the young blonde girl on the bus. And by design, the stuff is put out there. You are shown this outrage content that is supposed to get you emotional and get you wound up and get you passionate and frothing at the mouth and caring and compassionate, and your heartbreak goes up and your fear and your sadness and your it's all there. It's just whipping you up into a frenzy. Yeah, Frank says the New Age cult, something for everybody. That's it. So people turn away from organized religions, right? They'll poo-poo it, and for plenty of good reasons. Again, there's evidence on both sides of the aisle. There's evidence of the good that organized religions do. There's evidence of the corruption and the mind control and the social engineering that organized religions do, right? So but on the whole, people turn away from the organized religions, but humans are religious creatures. We might turn away from Christianity, but it'll still leave a space in our life that something's got to fill, and that something might be Gaza. That something might be climate change. That something might be, insert Tavistock media here, and that's a Frank's term there, Tavistock media. Yeah, so you're going to be worshiping something, and you're going to be paying attention to something religiously or doing something religiously, because that's what we are. That's what we do, and they'll provide you with these religions. And Mark Passio, he's great for talking about religions in a very strict sense as something that ties back human progress. I think the word comes from religare, which literally means to tie down or to hold down or tie back. I should check my Latin dictionary. I did get one, but not right now. And so he includes money as a religion. He includes politics as a religion. He's got a real broad scope and definition of what he calls a religion. And so I think that's kind of just the point that Zbig's making there, is like people, in the absence of the organized religions that they used to follow, because they didn't have a choice in a lot of cases. Now there's all these other kind of bespoke other religions that you can pick up and wear and try on, and if that doesn't fit, you go to the next one, and maybe it's yoga, or maybe it's I don't know, what's the Hare Krishna one? That one always gives me a chuckle when I see those fellas downtown. So something for everybody, and you can shop around and try the one that you're gonna stay in. Yeah, that's it. That's the way the system's built now. Continuing, in this new and passionate dialogue, established and widely used terminologies are increasingly useless. That's another really good point. How often I was last weekend when I was back in my hometown, I had a few pints with my dad and his friend down a pub, and I noticed this happen. I was we were debating a topic, and I found that normal everyday words were being used and thrown around, but we didn't seem to have the same understanding of what they meant. That's why it's really important to define your terms. Even though these are well-known concepts or words or phrases or vocabulary, you can't assume the other person's using it, wielding it in the same way that you do. So this is very all-important step of saying, okay, before we continue, what do you mean by democracy? What do you mean by money? What do you mean by Jew? What do you mean by occult? Like these hot things that get people fired. What do you mean by God? What do you mean by atheism? There's all these terms that people fight and disagree and argue over, and that are loaded and hot and emotionally charged. And that's how you get manipulated. And these terms are increasingly useless because people don't pause and stop to define them first before they just want to wade in and start arguing and being outraged and falling out and winning and getting one-upping each other. And I showed you there, and I beat you in the argument or whatever. And it's harder and harder and harder to find people who approach these hot, loaded topics with a kind of win-win outcome in mind. Meaning most people want a win-lose situation. They want to win, and they want you to, and thereby, that means you got to lose. They have to be right. They have to be correct. And that means you have to be wrong and you have to be incorrect. Very few people go into these kind of hot topics and disagreements with this view of like, well, we can't both be right here, so let's have a good faith exchange of information. Let's define our terms, and let's both improve each other's awareness and understanding to the best of our ability, so that we both leave this better informed, and maybe if it's appropriate, we'll come to an agreement, and one of us will change our mind when they're presented with good evidence and logical arguments. It's a lot to ask, isn't it, from a lot of people these days. So you just kind of end up with people going like, it's the Jews, and like, what do you mean by Jews? No, it's not, like, they're our greatest ally, and like, no, I'm not talking about Israel, and it's just silly, and that's not the topic we were talking about. I'm just picking that one because I know it's a spicy hot topic that gets people fired up and has a lot of attention on it at the moment. So yeah, increasingly useless, and by design. People are dumbed down. They have their ability to formulate arguments and be persuasive and use like the grammar, logic, rhetoric, three-step trivia method of learning and knowledge acquisition and sharing of knowledge, because rhetoric is the third step where you share it, you speak to someone and you try and communicate what you've learned, and that's what we call wisdom, right? The knowledge that you communicate to others. None of those skills are given to us, so maybe we stumble upon them online someday, and we kind of teach ourselves how to use them a little bit, but they're not in schools. You're not getting that in your 15,000 hours of government indoctrination, because then, that would be chaos, wouldn't it? People would actually come to terms with each other. They would find common ground, they would unite, and they would probably have a much better chance in getting the parasitical minority off their necks. But this is a really interesting point. I'm going to read this section, that first sentence of the paragraph again. In this new and passionate dialogue, established and widely used terminologies are increasingly useless. Terms such as capitalism, democracy, I used that example, socialism and communism, even nationalism, are no longer adequate to provide relevant insights. In ideologically dominated societies, such as the communist nations, this inadequacy expresses itself more and more in even overt attacks on the official ideology. In societies with looser, more implicit values, it prompts a search for some acceptable and relevant framework. In both cases, the accent is on the need to combine the previously dominant emphasis on external man with renewed attention to his inner life. In both cases, as was true of Marxism in the industrial age, there is the felt need for a new intellectual synthesis. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That's the third step. It's similar to the problem, reaction, solution. In the symptomatic of our age, it is symptomatic of our age that despite its intense turbulence, it's not produced a relevant concept of revolution, a strategy of action designed to replace operative institutions and values with a new set. That is, both a method of change and the substance of that change. The industrial age did produce such a concept, Marxism, and it was later applied to countries in the process of industrialization. There is no such theory available to the post-industrial societies, nor has the New Left succeeded in providing one. Moreover, whereas in the past ideologies of change gravitated from the developed world to less developed areas, thereby stimulating imitation of the developed world, today the differences between the two worlds are so pronounced that it is difficult to conceive of a new ideological wave originating from the developed world and rapidly acquiring relevance for underdeveloped nations. Total, integrative revolutions were possible because integrative ideologies provided a framework for total change and reconstruction. The integrative, how many times are you going to make me say this word? The integrative ideology was in itself a reflection of an age in which authority rested on clearly established beliefs and institutions. That word's come up enough times now that I actually want to quickly look up the pronunciation just to make sure I'm saying it right. Congeries, that was the other new word for today. Integrative. Right, so we have got over on good old dictionary.com integrative. Oh, it doesn't tell you integrative. That bold text means that's the syllable, I think. Yeah, that little dash there means this is the syllable that you stress when you say it. It's just taking me back to my English teaching days. I used to use the phonetic alphabet to teach pronunciation. It would blow my students' minds. Integrative. 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 There you go. Integrative. So we got it. Easy. It's one of those situations now where I've said the word and heard the word so many times it started to lose its meaning, you know. Back to the book. The Communist Party, with its claim to infallibility, was thus the epitome of an age of integrated grand visions and authoritarian institutions. Rapid scientific change, the massive educational explosion, and the intense communications implosion are all factors that make for highly volatile beliefs and reactions and create a situation in which subjective feelings are more important than collective commitment to a blueprint for social action and organization. Yeah, it's pretty prescient then in the 1970s that he saw this foregrounding of the subjective feeling, emotional reality of people, because that's what's in all our schools and universities now. How do you feel? What do you feel like on the inside? What do your feelings tell you? It's all that kind of like touchy feely sort of emphasis now, and less so on logic and rationality and reason and temperance and self control. It's no wonder that we have so many clownfish walking around out there. Yet, subjective feelings are more important. Accordingly, for the present, both the fragmentation unification tensions that are stimulated on the political, economic, and intellectual planes by the gap between the technological and electronic age, and the persistence in a new era of institutions and social forms derived from another age, point toward a time of turbulence rather than toward a time of fundamental revolution. The more developed world is facing a crisis of its liberal democratic consensus. The communist world is finding it difficult to adapt its ideology. The third world seeks a frame of reference in a modified form of socialism that substitutes emotion for orthodoxy. In the past, the world lived in an environment of compartmentalized uniformity. Agrarian societies, basically similar in socioeconomic structure, but differentiated in religious and cultures, were isolated from one another. Today, differentiated socioeconomic realities existing in an intellectual context of crumbling religions and ideologies overlap perceptually. The psychic certitude of the past thus gives way to psychic tension. Confidence of righteousness yields to feelings of guilt or resentful inferiority. There's a little footnote here which says, thus in the past, when Christians and Muslims hated one another, they did so in self-righteous confidence. Today, third world citizens may hate Americans for their wealth, but at the same time despise their own felt inferiority, whereas Americans feel guilty about their wealth, but savor a feeling of technological superiority. It is possible that in the present phase of intellectual turmoil, there are for the first time the seeds of a globally relevant perspective. Oh, here we go. The world brain on the horizon. The seeds of a globally relevant perspective. The only solution that can solve all our woes is globalism. The assertively universalist ideologies of the 19th century were in fact highly parochial in their origins, and thus they quickly merged with nationalism. This turned out to be particularly true of communism under Stalin. The seemingly inner-oriented ideas and ideals that dominate in a highly unstructured manner, the current dialogue, are in fact much more concerned with the universal problems of man and with the reintegration of the spiritual and the material. Man's vision of himself was at first, I just paused there because you got to be really, I don't know if arrogant's the right word, but something like that to make these kinds of grand sweeping statements about, the problems of man and to claim that you know what man's vision of himself. This is the next sentence. It just has this arrogance to it, like all men, like you speak on behalf of all men, right, and women, and all cultures, and all times, and all languages, and all places. It's just like it just struck me then how sort of almost breathtakingly arrogant it is to write in such a way. Man's vision of himself was at first highly primitive and fragmentary, reflecting thousands of small cultures. Out of these eventually emerged several religions. Just the religions just emerged. They just evolved, just naturally, like a totally unplanned, uncoordinated thing, just emerged spontaneously. several religions with universal aspirations, though each was still culturally and territorially confined. The age of secularism gave rise to a more political vision in which nationalism, elevated into a universal principle, was combined with largely European derived ideologies that aspired to universal applicability. Whether our phase is a transition or the beginning of a more fundamental disintegration is likely to be very much influenced by what happens in the two major societies of our time, the United States and the Soviet Union, and by what happens to the two major contemporary visions of the modern world, liberalism and communism. And I think this is such a great setup for our next book, which is Foundations, Their Power and Influence, in which it was revealed that the plan for liberalism and communism was to merge them together. So you have the thesis, you have the antithesis, and thereby smooshing them together, you can create a synthesis. So that's the end of part 2, chapter 3. Next time, we're going to be continuing with part 3, Communism, the Problem of Relevance. Woo. Excellent stuff. I'm going to have to pause there and have a sip. Good stuff, though. Very much enjoying tonight's reading. Enjoyed tonight's reading, I suppose I should say. Because it is now over. But again, some big ideas, some grand sweeping accounts of, some big ideas is exactly the right appropriate phrase for that particular chapter. The abstractions I do find tricky to comment on and discuss and talk about and analyze and reflect on, because I feel like a lot of that stuff is just man-made concepts. And I said to Melissa in a chat the other day, I feel this way when people talk about theology, that people go into these concepts and ideas that I think, how do you measure them? How do you prove them? How do you observe them in reality? And it's true to a certain extent for me, at least, when it comes to like money and economics as well. And there's certain things that I just don't take to very comfortably and naturally, right? And some of these kind of big ideas are like that. So I find myself just seizing upon a particular sentence or idea or word and trying to riff off that and trying to add some reaction to it. But, you know, I think the lesson here is that we all should not be put off by reading what we might call hard books. Like, I could probably read this 5 times. I would probably have to read it 5 times to really get to grips with what he's saying and internalize it and be able to comment on it sort of with any level of professionalism. But that shouldn't put us off trying to tackle these kinds of books and giving it a go and seeing what we can glean and what we can take away, because there's plenty in there. And you don't have to understand every word. You don't have to understand every paragraph, every idea, the flow of it all. You can just get in and there's a quote that always sticks with me that's from Guy Ritchie's interview with Joe Rogan. Not often that I mention Bro Jogan and on this channel, but the Guy Ritchie interview, there's a clip where he's talking about his suit, and he's talking about the story of the prodigal son and how stories have layers, and some people will just see the exoteric storyline. You know, these people do a thing, they go on an adventure, and it resolves the end. Then other people will see the esoteric, the symbolism and the deeper meanings and the deeper truths. And what he says is, when they're talking, Joe Rogan asks him, well, don't you think some people are going to come to your film and they're all they're going to see is just the surface level storyline? And he says, well, people will come to the film and you'll glean what you can glean when you're ready to glean what you're ready to glean. It's a really crap phrase. He says, but it's something like that. And his point is just that we're all at the place we're at, and as long as we're taking in and making the effort and taking in information, and we're trying to get it from the best source that we can, in my opinion, that's books. We're trying to get it from somewhere that it's a bit more reliable, not so infused with outrage and drama and all that other crap that we tend to get these days. Then we don't have to understand everything and every aspect and come away with an encyclopedic knowledge of the text and the chapter and all that. We're gleaning stuff, and a lot of it's going in, and it's similar in the way that television downloads lots into your subconscious, right? You just sat through that video with me, hopefully, and you took all those words in, and you might not remember them all and be able to recall them like that. And oh yeah, on that page there was such a quote, but it all went in, and it's all in there now. And you'll sleep tonight, and there'll be some rearranging and processing going on in your mind, and there'll be like sentence structures and grammatical phrasings, and you know, the new words that we looked at today, which I've already forgotten. We learned how to pronounce integrative. And the other word we looked at was, let me get that up for you, conjuries. So, you know, don't be put off. I suppose I'm talking to myself more than anyone else here. Nick, don't be put off by the fact that you feel like you only understand like less than 5% of what you're reading here. Because we got the replays, right? That's the nice thing about streaming. We got the replays. So we can always go back and review and re-listen if we got a long car ride or a train journey or a long walk in the woods or something. We can always go back and review. So great. I enjoyed that chapter. Again, a lot of food for thought. So many big ideas. I am enjoying this book. It is a challenge. I think the next one's going to be a challenge. But that's what it's all about, isn't it? Challenging ourselves. It's like a workout for the mind. It's like a gym for your attention and your concentration and your focus and your ability to articulate ideas. If it was easy, it would be like watching an episode of Coronation Street or EastEnders or some nonsense like that. But that's not why we're here. We're here for a bit more of a workout, a challenge, something that's going to make us sweat a little bit. And so I hope you had that experience tonight. Not that I hope you're sweaty, but that I hope you enjoyed a bit of a workout for your mind, and you'll be a bit sharper and a little more able to articulate ideas, talk about them, discuss them, and deal with them and interact with them, because that's what it comes about. That's what it comes down to. It's like empowering ourselves with the abilities to communicate with other people, so that, you know, when they try and fact check us, or they don't believe that things that we're telling them, we can say, well, you know, it's not me, it's Zbigniew Brzezinski, and he was a presidential advisor, and he wrote a book, and this is what he said in the book. As I've said many times, it's removing ourselves in a way from the things we're trying to talk about, and we're letting these mainstream people, you know, these diplomats, these advisors, these national security advisors, we're letting them do the heavy lifting for us. And that takes a lot of weight off our shoulders, but it gives a lot more authority and weight to what we're saying and communicating when we're trying to get these ideas across to the normies and the sheeps and the NPCs and all that other stuff, right? So thank you very much for hanging out. I think I got everybody's messages and mentioned everybody. I think I did. Lee, I think I mentioned you earlier, didn't I, Lee, when you were here? But thank you all. It's always good to see you hanging out and adding comments. I didn't even put my links out there today, but yeah, you know, allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. That's got everything you need on it. That's got your way to get in touch with me, the social media channels where you can find me. It's got links to my online community where we're reading First Global Revolution. We're almost done, so we'll be starting a new book pretty soon. And it's got a link to Continuity of Control, which is the free email series I put together, which I'm really proud of. You know, that has now gone out to almost 200 people, which is pretty exciting. I haven't had a lot of feedback yet, but that's because it's quite a long series. It's spread out over 9 weeks. So I think most people are probably about halfway through at this point. But yeah, 370 subscribers altogether, and we got like 1,000 emails have gone out. So give it a go. It's a series that I created just to facilitate and expedite people's understanding. It's got a bunch of really important quotes, all kind of like loaded up into neat little email packages that get delivered weekly. So it's digestible, it's accessible. It takes up 3 to 5 minutes of your week, but it'll give you all these quotes that you can store away and share with other people and tell other people about, and say, look, again, this is not me coming up with this. This is H.G. Wells, or this is Bertrand Russell, or Zbig is in there. There's an email all about Zbig and this book. And I wrote that email when I'd only read about a quarter of the book. So there's all the rest of the book that's probably full of quotes, tasty quotes that I could have put in there. But there was enough in the first quarter of the book that I could write a whole email about it. And Carol Quigley's in there as well. So that's continuityofcontrol.com. And I'm really proud of that project. It's a nice thing to share around and show to other people, particularly if people are starting to ask questions, starting to pay attention. Maybe they're saying, oh, that thing you said, I was thinking about it. And yeah, maybe you're right. How did you know that? Or then it's a nice resource you can give to people. Say, well, this will get you started and give you that foundational kind of awareness that you need to then go down other avenues of research and reading, and it introduces you to 12 books. You might read a bunch of quotes from one of those books and say, do you know what? I want to read that whole book. And so it also facilitates your own learning journey, because you can choose what you read in full next, right? So it almost functions like a little taster menu as well. Before you go and order the full plate, you can have a little taste of what's on offer. So cheers, everybody. Lovely to have you here. Very good to be back. So grateful that the stream worked and we didn't crap out. So that means the fixes that I did worked, and Zbig is not haunting the wires in my house. So that's great news, and I think we can proceed with a bit of confidence that although now the thing that I'm facing is this whole Windows 10, Windows 11 question, because they've made Windows 10 obsolete. So now the question is, do you download Windows 11, which is like well known to be total crap and full of surveillance AI? Do you carry on with a unsecure Windows 10, or do you transfer your whole thing over to Linux, or do you just buy a preloaded Linux laptop? This is the question that I'm thinking about now. So we'll see what happens. But thank you all for being here. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend, a fantastic week. Take good care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you on the next one. God bless.